2 Corinthians 4 and verse 4, he's called the God of this world. I could, but I won't. Just check somebody else who was taking good notes. And then 1 Thessalonians 3 and verse 5. 1 Thessalonians 3 and verse 5, he's called the tempter. Interesting phrases, interesting descriptive names to give to him. One of the things I would suggest to you is, and happen to think of it now, we'll talk more a little bit about it later, is we make fun of the devil's name. And there are a couple of passages we'll consider here in a little bit that I don't think that's a good idea. You know, call him Old Scratch and things like that. Charlie Daniels did a song several years ago, Devil Went Down to Georgia. I don't think that's really a good thing to make a song out of. That's dangerous. But then I also believe that, you know, when you start fooling around with Ouija boards and stuff like that, you're messing with things that you ought to be careful about. Anyway, okay, let's look at a consideration. I got a consideration for you here. And here's what I think. I don't know it, can't prove it, but here's kind of where I'm leaning. When God made man, he puts him in the garden. And by the way, it's just called Eden. There was a garden somewhere in Eden. We call it Garden of Eden, but anyway. He puts him there. He's made different from the angels. He has a physical body of flesh and blood. Luke chapter 24 says that angels are spirit beings. They have no flesh and bones and blood. God then makes the animals. He makes man male and female. And he has Adam name all the animals that existed while he is still the only being at that time. Woman hadn't been created yet. Adam names all the animals before Eve's created, to realize that all the others created physical body beings. All these had companions. He has no companion. And he wants Adam to realize that you need a companion that's like you. Angelic beings didn't need to fulfill each other or to help each other with relationships. But God gives mankind dominion over the entire earth. And then he puts guardians in Eden, or at least one. At least one. And so, to me, the passage could intimate a little bit that God assigned his most beautiful, wisest cherub to guard the garden. It's just a possibility. I'm just, speculating a little bit. And so picture this, the most beautiful, wisest cherub guarding the garden because of his beauty, wisdom, splendor, and power, and he succumbs to total arrogance. It's also interesting, later on, Paul will say that a novice should not be appointed as an elder, so he doesn't fall under the same condemnation as the devil. Pride, arrogance, wanting control. So anyway, going back to this angelic being sees that these beings God has made, and God gives Adam a command, says, eat of all the trees except for that one over there. And the cherub decides to take on another form because he can do that. Apparently has that ability. And he takes on the form of a serpent, a snake, however you want to look at that. Now, Eve is very naive and innocent, but you always wonder, shouldn't you have sense enough not to talk to a snake? But shouldn't she have suspected something when the snake starts talking to her? As far as we know, no other animals had talked to her up to this point that we know. Yeah, there's a lot of things about that whole situation we don't have answers for. But he tempts her with something that's tempting him. Wouldn't you like to be like God? Wouldn't you like to just eat of that tree and know what God knows and be like God is? And that's only a half lie. Half lie is still a lie, isn't it? But by eating from that tree's fruit, she's going to know more and be more like God. And in a sense, she'll have more knowledge. The best lies are half-truths. And if you've ever seen those things at work, boy, they're dangerous. But he plays on the same emotion in her that is stirred in him. And he convinces her to eat of that fruit, and now we have trouble. There's a divine dilemma that's occurred. You know, you're familiar enough with the story, or should be, that God calls Adam and Eve to account in the garden. You know, where are you? Why are you wearing clothes? Well, because we're naked. Who told you were naked? You didn't know that before, and what's going on? Their innocence is gone. So, you know, they start the blame game. Well, why did you do that? Well, the woman you gave to me. Start blaming God. If you hadn't given me the woman, I wouldn't be here, you know. I was just happy naming animals. That's all I wanted to do. I was listening to one guy today. One guy today on the radio was talking about, he said, you know, I just want to lay at home, my t-shirt, shorts, lay on the couch and eat ice cream off my stomach like an otter. You know, that's the way guys are. But anyway, she blames the serpent for that. She turns to her, why, you know, well, the serpent, he did that. And so the consequences of all that, there's a lot of pain, and there's a prophecy about all that pain. You're going to have pain. There's no more tree of life. There's a decline in your longevity. You've lost the dominion over earth and the animal world. You're going to work by the sweat of your brow. Here's what's interesting. I had not considered this until I started reading some of their materials. I thought, I've got nothing for a rebuttal. I've got nothing. And what they said was, you're going to have pain in your childbearing. Does that imply she already had some children? From now on, she would have pain, huh? Yeah, you're going to have pain. Well, does that imply that maybe she already had some children that weren't from pain? Well, see, we don't know. I'm just throwing stuff out there. No, they didn't have pain before, but could they have had children without pain? Were there some other kids? You know, and it says, I've gotten me a man-child. You know, maybe because there were already some girls who had been. I don't know. We don't have all the answers. I'm just throwing all that out to say, you know, anybody who tells you they've got all the answers, they'd probably fib about other things. You know, we don't have nearly as many. Anyway, they're thrown out of the garden. They're forbidden to come back in. Their angels put there with swords to keep them out. But there's a prophecy involved, and it's about Satan. And in chapter 3, he mentions the seed of woman. And that's interesting because, you know, the seed, technically, you know, biologically, is in the male, but it's a veiled reference to the virgin birth. And this serpent is going to wound the heel of the seed of woman, but Jesus will crush Satan's head ultimately. When did the fall of angels occur? That's a question. We really don't know. Maybe they occurred at the same time the fall of humanity occurred. And to get an idea of how bad Satan really is, you know, how would you like to give somebody the responsibility of guarding your children and they turned your children against you? And not only that, but then they're going to cause your children to die. And I realize there's a lot of speculative thought in all of this, you know, but you're welcome to read Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14 if you've got another suggestion. I'm open to it. But it's just interesting to me to kind of study and consider some things maybe from that angle and how they affect some of these other passages. But why does Satan want more of God's children? He hates the father, and the more pain he inflicts on the children, the more he hurts the father. He's filled with hate, especially toward the father. And don't ever underestimate the power of hate. It causes people to do things that are detrimental to their own selves because they're so filled with hate. Hate is an incredible monster. And Satan's filled with hate, even to his own detriment. And he wants at any price to destroy the father and all the father's children. And so when this world ends and Satan's defeated and he's bound and chained for good, he is going to have a kingdom. He is going to have a kingdom. It's not going to be the one that he wanted originally, but it'll be one of pain, darkness, and torment. And he wants all the slaves that he can get into that kingdom. He wanted to be God and have all of us worship him. And as many of us as he can condemn will belong to him, and they will worship him. But there was a rebellion. I'm not sure how he led the other angels away. The main thing he seems to be playing on for everybody else is pride, and that kind of thing, arrogance. He used it to get Eve and Adam. Maybe that'll work with the other angels. Entice them and lure them away with the promise of victory and sharing in that rule. He's very persuasive. He's beautiful. He's powerful. He's wise. He's got all these things going for him. And the reason that's kind of scary to me is I stop and think, and I look back at some of history's leaders. Boy, look at people like Hitler. Saddam Hussein. Some of those people, look how persuasive they were. Where did they learn that? From the master that they followed, who taught them about arrogance and taught them about all of that stuff. And so, you and I live with making conscientious decisions for as long as we live. But when an angel makes a decision, the difference between us and them is we can get forgiveness and change. They're stuck with it for all eternity. They're stuck with it for all eternity. And the other point on your outline is it's a continual activity. This thing just goes on and on and on. And it's going to go on until Jesus comes back. It's going to go on until Jesus comes back and takes care of all of that stuff. Well, let's talk about his activity for a few minutes. Yes, sir. Sure. Seeing you're a page ahead of me again. And we'll talk about some of that. But right now, just looking at it from Satan's point of view, what it seems to be saying about him and why he's doing. Because he doesn't know God's mind. He doesn't know what God wants. God knows what he's doing and how he's going to work it all out. But in the meantime, Satan thinks he's doing all this on his own and getting away with it. But God has something else. And we'll look at some of that when we start talking about the good angels and the forces that are on our side and fighting the good fight and that kind of thing in 3 of the lessons, okay? But just his all this he's doing is he just keeps doing it. I want to talk a little bit about about his activity. 1 Peter 5 and verse 8. And it tells us what? Anybody remember what that says basically offhand? He goes about as what? Roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. It's in a present tense. He didn't stop doing it. He never has stopped doing it. He's still doing it. He wants to destroy. And in Ephesians 6, verse 11 and 12 that we looked at a while ago, we got the idea there as we discussed it that our fight's not against flesh and blood, principalities, powers, authorities, something we can't see, but that's what's behind all the things that are going on. His purpose, I think, is a very interesting and a very challenging one to consider and to look at. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 26. Well, we'll just go over there and read it. 2 Timothy 2 and verse 26. Told you I had a lot of stuff. Boy, this clock's running quickly on me. Verse 25 says, instructing his opponents with gentleness, perhaps God will grant them repentance to know the truth. Then they may come to their senses and escape the devil's trap, having been captured by him to do his will. And so, if the devil's not really doing anything, then all you can say about temptation is it comes from within us. How does the devil take us captive? We talked about some of those things. 2 Corinthians 4:4 says, the God of this age has blinded the mind of unbelievers so they cannot see the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is the image of God. If you can take people captive, if you can blind their minds so that they can't even see Jesus Christ, that there's something he's doing, then this one who's able to do that has a lot of power, doesn't he? He has a lot of power. And it's no wonder that he wants to control people all the way up to the grave. If he can get up to the grave, they belong to him for eternity. People die outside of Jesus Christ, and he's accomplished his goal. Ephesians 2 and verse 2 says, he's at work in the children of disobedience. John 13 and verse 2 says that he prompted Judas to sin. Boy, I wish I understood all of that. First Chronicles chapter 21, he incites David to sin. I wonder if he whispered in his ear, sent one of his other angels to do that. I'm not sure how he did that. First Chronicles 21. I don't have the verse written down there. Like one of my instructors used to say, read it all, you'll get it. Luke 22 and verse 31, Jesus says to Peter, said, Satan sifted. He asked to have you. He sifted Simon Peter. Satan's trying to do something to Peter, and it's just described as a sifting process, trying to wear you down, break you down. Acts 5 and verse 3 tells us that he fills the heart of those who are obeying him rather than obeying God. He will do that. He has that power and that ability to do that. So he is doing something, and he's doing it now. He's tempting, he's leading astray, he's filling their heart, he's prompting, he's inciting, he's sifting, he's taking them captive. And, regardless of anything else I'd say, you'd have to say, yeah, I agree with that. That's what the book says. But think, he's doing that right now. He has control of the world and its inhabitants. There seems to be what's implied in the Daniel 10 passage we talked about, the idea that maybe Satan has somehow divided up the world geographically. You've got a prince of Persia. He's not a physical ruler, but he's a prince over Persia. He's an angelic being of some kind who watches over that. If you extrapolate that out a little bit, does that mean that there's a prince over Asia? Does that mean there's a prince over other countries? I wonder if there's a prince of America. Yeah, working overtime. The division, the principalities, and when you've got principalities, powers, and authorities, you break them down, you delegate, and you send them out there, and you put them to work on that. They're not just sitting around being called that. We do that in the church a lot. We give titles and we sit around and don't do anything with them. But Satan doesn't do that. He gives you a title and he sends you out on a job. The references to what he does are sometimes saying this is what he's personally doing. And sometimes it's there to stand for what he's doing through his forces. He's not like God. He can't be everywhere at once. But he has forces that he can send out on their missions to do what he wants them to do. When Job's children die, when Job was stricken with terrible disease, God didn't do that. But God did allow that to happen. The devil commissions, he empowers his angels to do certain things. And I get the idea they enjoy doing it. And that should be upsetting to us. He will entice and destroy people. Every human being has been tempted at one time or another and has given in to some temptation or another. And some have almost made it a career to give in. He knows where to attack you and how to do that. And that really bothers me. That's some spooky stuff to me that we'll look at when we talk about demons and bad angels. He's not gonna attack me with the same things that he would tempt Robert with or somebody else. How does he know where my weaknesses are and what they are and how to do that? I got some ideas about that, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the morning. And that's just kind of weird. But his primary goal, his primary idea, is to keep people from ever becoming Christians. God, in the big picture, wants people to become Christians. Satan is fighting that tooth and nail. He's going after it with everything that he's got. He's good at it, but he's not too good at it. Okay? But he does get some. If he can't steal my salvation, if he can't steal your salvation, he wants to steal our joy in our Christian experience. At least make that miserable, make that bad for them. But he does do this work and he's after it. Paul said, if we understand his schemes, we can overcome them. If you don't believe he's there, and if you make light of him, you're in trouble. You're in trouble in doing that. One of the other areas where that gets a little scary for me is talking about his power and his control. Look over in 2 Peter with me. 2 Peter chapter 2. We're not doing too bad here. I may go a couple of minutes over, but we're doing pretty good. I'm surprising myself.
Yeah. Bars don't close for a while yet.
Oh, okay. Well, all right, there you go. 2 Peter chapter 2, 1 through 12. But there were also false prophets among the people, just as there will be false teachers among you. They will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the master who bought them. Many will bring swift destruction on themselves. Many will follow their unrestrained ways, and because of them, the way of truth will be blasphemed. In their greed, they will exploit you with deceptive words. I wonder where they learned how to be deceptive. Their condemnation, pronounced long ago, is not idle, and their destruction does not sleep. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, but threw them down into Tartarus, and delivered them to be kept in chains of darkness until judgment. And if he didn't spare the ancient world, but protected Noah, preach of righteousness, and 7 others, when he brought a flood on the world of the ungodly. And if he reduced the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to ashes and condemned them to ruin, making them an example to those who were going to be ungodly. And if he rescued righteous Lot, distressed by the unrestrained behavior of the immoral, for as he lived among them, that righteous man tormented himself day by day with the lawless deeds he saw and heard, then the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials and to keep the unrighteous under punishment until the day of judgment, especially those who follow the polluting desires of the flesh and despise authority. Bold, arrogant people. They do not tremble when they blaspheme the glorious one. However, angels who are greater in might and power do not bring a slanderous charge against them before the Lord. But these people, like irrational animals, creatures of instinct, born to be caught and destroyed, speak blasphemies about things they don't understand, and in their destruction they too will be destroyed. He's saying, be aware of how powerful Satan is. Verse 1, he talks about the false prophets who led others astray. And then goes on to say he didn't spare the angels when they sinned. One sign of a false teacher: he's bold, he's arrogant, he's ignorant, and he's unafraid of celestial beings. And even angels, Peter said, who are more powerful than we are, they don't do that. They do combat in that arena, even in the presence of the Lord, and they will not blaspheme those celestial beings. Any human being who would blaspheme and slander a celestial being, Peter says he's like a brute animal. He's that ignorant. Now look over in Jude. Jude's little letter, verses 5 through 10. Now I want to remind you, though you know all these things, the Lord, having first of all saved the people out of Egypt, later destroyed those who did not believe. And he has kept with eternal chains in darkness for the judgment of the great day angels who did not keep their own position, but deserted their proper dwelling. In the same way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the cities around them committed sexual immorality and practiced perversions, just as they did, and serve as an example by undergoing the punishment of eternal fire. Nevertheless, these dreamers likewise defile their flesh, despise authority, and blaspheme glorious beings. Watch this. He's talking about angelic hosts. Yet Michael the archangel, when he was disputing with the devil in a debate about Moses' body, did not dare bring an abusive condemnation against him, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." But these people blaspheme anything they don't understand and what they know by instinct, like unreasoning animals. Again, like what Peter said. They destroy themselves with these things. There's a reminder there again, just like what Peter was talking about. Here's Michael. Satan wanted the body of Moses. Moses wasn't there, and he's probably really glad he wasn't. You know, his spirit and soul, they've gone. But he wants to fight over the body. Explain that one, you know. Anyway, get into a resurrection study, and that's good stuff too. Satan wants his body. God says no, but God sends Michael. Why didn't God do it himself? I don't know. He sends Michael to do it. Sometimes you get the idea God saying, you know what? It'd be a waste of my time fooling with you. I'll send one of the other boys to do my light work. And he sends Michael. And Michael will do battle with him, just like you will in Revelation chapter 12. But Michael will not badmouth him. He will not do that. And one of the points that Jude is bringing out here in this is that if Michael respected Satan's power that much, you and I should do the same thing. Respect the fact that he does have authority. Now, he's not like God. He's not all-knowing. He's not all-powerful. He's not all-seeing. He's not all-present. But he is powerful and he is knowing. And there are some things that God has told us because he doesn't want Satan to know it. He's not everywhere. Only God is. But since Satan is like that, it could be that maybe some in this room are not even important enough for Satan to know who you are. I'll let that one drift in a little bit and think about it. As far as just the being Satan himself. On the other hand, he's got angels who work for him. And down the line, you've got these other orders and principalities, angels who work for angels and that kind of thing. I think if you're a believer, there's at least one bad angel who probably knows your name. That one should bother you a little bit. Again, you know, sometimes the reference isn't just Satan himself, but whoever's assigned to your case, if we want to use that kind of terminology. It's implied that Satan doesn't know all of us, but yet there are some that are known and some that are being dealt with and worked over along those lines. But if you've attracted the attention of Satan himself, it's probably because you're a warrior of God. I think there's potentially people in this room that Satan does know personally, and he's after you. And as weird as it sounds, that's a good thing. If you're such a force for God that Satan himself has decided to know about you, I think there have been people in Christianity, I'll just say in our fellowship, some I've known, people like Marshall Keeble, Gus Nichols, other folks like that. I think Satan knew exactly who they were because they worked so hard for the cause of Christ. Respect Satan the way you would a rattlesnake. Here's a creature that can do you a lot of harm. Don't take him lightly. He's limited in his presence, his power, and his knowledge, but don't undercut him and underestimate him. Where do you think Satan's most powerful strongholds are in this country? Churches? I don't think so. Huh? Yeah, I would say the two places would be Washington, D.C. and Hollywood, California. And I'm dead serious about that. You look at what the movie industry's doing, you look at what the politics are doing, two of the most powerful places he could work out of. And, you know, but I get back to the idea that if there are evil beings who know who you are, you should be concerned about that. You know, if there's somebody in your life that you know well enough that you can, let's use the word manipulate in a good way, that you can get them, you know, to do some things they do because they know who you are. Don't you think that Satan hasn't learned how to do that? Get some folks to manipulate you who might know something about you. Satan's very powerful. Yes, sir. I don't think God would do that. I don't think God would give Satan any insight. God might open the door for him like he did with Job and say, you go ahead and go after him. But you're limited on what you can do to him. But I don't think that he would give him the information. I was going to say to get an idea of how powerful he is, in Luke chapter 13, there's a woman who was afflicted with an issue of blood for 18 years. And Satan has had her bound with that. And I wish I understood all that was involved with that. But when you talk about the devil going about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he will devour on that, Peter watched that woman be healed by Jesus, and then later on writes about what the devil is like. He's got an idea how powerful he is, and he's trying to give you and me some warning about that. Somehow these beings can communicate. I don't know how they do all of that. There are things that you can look at, you can wonder about. The Bible talks about God speaking to people in dreams, angels speaking to people in dreams. I'm not sure about how all the things are, but when the Bible says Satan prompted Judas to betray Jesus, I don't know how he did that. When he incited David to number the people of Israel in 1 Chronicles 21, there's an influence and a power there that's really kind of scary. It's really kind of scary. And so he goes on to talk about the battle that we have. And I'm glad that the battle is not ours. I'm glad the battle belongs to the Lord, aren't you? I'm glad it belongs to the Lord. I wanted to give you a couple of other thoughts here real quick, because I've got so much, and there's just not time to go through all of it and get it out there. But just to remind you of who he is, the reality, the power, his activity. I'm gonna bring the quote tomorrow. I meant to bring it with me tonight and forgot to. Joe Beam updated his book, revised his book, that's the term I want, from the first one he wrote. And he was talking, I was sharing this with university the other night. And it's something to the effect that, when you and I behave the way we do and what we do, at the end of our actions and our behavior, somebody smiles. It's either God or Satan. Who's smiling on the basis of the way we're living and what we're doing? Both of them want control of your soul for all eternity. We're just the battleground. Our souls are the battleground for what they're doing. But the fight is there, and it's very, very real. Do not underestimate your opponent. So I just want to take a little bit of a look at him tonight, give you some things to think about. Tomorrow morning we'll talk a little bit about some of those negative forces and some of the positive forces that are being used, okay? Any last minute questions, comments? Well, Sir? 9 o'clock sharp, yes, sir. We didn't finish at 9 o'clock sharp, but we will start at 9 o'clock sharp and go from there on all of that. Thank you very much for your attention, for your input. I appreciate it very much.